So Tyler Hayes is the founder and CEO of Atom Limbs. They're a company in our portfolio that's building the most advanced prosthetics on the planet. But if you asked him, he'd say that he's building artificial bodies. Because unlike every other prosthetic that might be using AI, humanoid robotics, or in separate projects, his team works at the intersection of all three. Just a few years ago, he had zero hardware experience. But once he set his sights on this problem, he learned everything he could about the space and put together a team of the best hardware engineers in SF, most of which were 20 years his senior. This guy is insane, which is why he came by today to share his knowledge with the founders in our current program. We talked about the state of fundraising in deep tech, all the excitement around hardware right now, how to find investors in your field, how he built his team, and what they do to iterate faster than any of their competitors. Hope you enjoy it, and of course, if you're building something awesome and want to build alongside people like him, you can apply at the link below. So give it up for Tyler. Okay, so real quick, we'll cover the basics. So tell us about your background. If you want to repeat your name and title and everything, that can work too. But just tell us your background and how you got into this.
Yeah, my name's Furkan Rydon. I started fundraise. So for people who don't know me, my name is Tyler Hayes. I've been around in Silicon Valley for 15 years. I grew up in Minnesota, land of 10,000 lakes. I left because there weren't enough lakes. And I started my career at a rocket ship YC company, probably like a lot of people in here are doing right now or going to do soon. It's called Disqus, D-I-S-Q-U-S. It was if you've ever seen comments below a blog post or news article on the internet, we basically powered all of that. I joined as employee number 10, created the product team with another guy, and we scaled that to just over 1 billion users across 10 million sites over a few years. And then left and started a healthcare software company called Prime, which was the #1 family health records app in the App Store. And then joined Bebo in the second wave of Bebo with Furkan and Sean and everyone else. And then we basically ran that for 4 years and then sold it to Amazon and Twitch, obviously. And then I didn't go to Twitch. I was the one person on the team who didn't go to Twitch. And I left and silently started a new company called Atom. And at Atom, we make artificial bodies. Basically, the idea is we bring AI to the human body to reverse engineer the human nervous system and make artificial limbs. So we're starting with artificial arms. Think of it as a neurally mind-controlled AI prosthetic arm.
So you were involved in a lot of software projects, and I believe you studied psychology. Was it in college or?
Yeah, I got 2 BAs. I got a BA in psychology specializing in neuroscience because I wanted to be a neurosurgeon, but I'm way too ADHD to be a neurosurgeon. And I got a degree in Japanese. I don't talk about this publicly too much, but basically when we sold Bebo, I was already starting to angel invest in the longevity space because I want to live forever, unabashedly. I want to live forever. I don't mean 150 years, I mean 150,000 years. And so I was looking at companies to invest in that did prosthetics. And I went undercover to an amputee conference and just told everyone there, I was I'm an angel investor, just lied to everyone. And I was looking at all their prosthetic products, and they were all just frankly dog shit. Prosthetics, I don't know if anyone here knows it, prosthetics just suck today. They're still really, really bad. Hook arms just 100 years ago, mostly kind of peg legs. And I was just this is stupid, this is ridiculous. I feel I know enough about robotics and hardware even back then. Because we had kind of tooled around with some stuff at Bebo. Furkan was always bringing in his drones and VR headsets and stuff. But honestly, I didn't have a background in hardware. So I got a bunch of people who did have a background in hardware to join our team. And then when we finally kind of spent 6 months looking at what we could do in this space, we were oh shit, we could actually do way more in prosthetics than we thought we could. We could restore a lot more ability. We could begin to restore sensation. And we could squint and we could see a path to full human augmentation, basically.
So my 2 questions from that are, when you were shifting into this hardware focus and you're starting to see all these different problems in prosthetics, you don't have the hardware background. How did you go about identifying what the problems were in prosthetics? What was that testing period for you, that discovery process?
Well, when I went to that conference, it was an amputee conference. There was 1,500 amputees there. And I literally just walked around and I just was why aren't you wearing a prosthetic? Why aren't you wearing a prosthetic? Why aren't you? And I met, 300 or 400 people. And the summary of all that, the punchline was they cost way too much money and they just really didn't do anything. So like the delta between what they could do at that point versus literally just any improvement was so massive. They were just like, okay, obviously we know we can improve things. As for like specific changes, where did we start? We said, okay, one, if someone wants to make like a bionic arm today, it's going to cost like thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of dollars for them to make them. And we know we can make them for much cheaper. And so we said, why don't we just design and develop everything ourselves so we can make it cheaper? Second was, okay, well, none of them today have, for example, like full wrist control. They have the ability to rotate their wrist, but not adduct and abduct their wrist, like picking up a frying pan, or flex and extend them. So we said, well, why don't we just make a wrist that can do all three? None of them had individual finger control. So still today on the market, no prosthetic arm has individual finger control. Like even in those YouTube videos you've seen, or like 60 Minutes or whatever, like none of them actually move their individual fingers. It's always a smoke show. So we were like, well, let's just do all of that. And I know it sounds kind of crazy to just be like, well, let's just do it, but robotics can do that. So we just said, well, let's just do it and then give it to people and see if they want it. And obviously they did. We have like 11,000 people on our wait list now.
What do you tell all those people on your wait list?
Please wait.
Okay, so who was the first person that like you went after to join your team, and like how did you convince them?
I, as a non-hardware founder CEO, I knew I needed at least one really great industrial designer on the founding team and one really great mech E, someone to represent mechanical engineering, EE, whatever it was. And so I actually funny story, basically I emailed a guy I know who was an ID, an industrial designer, and he's like, I would suck at this, but you should talk to this woman. And then he connected me with her on email, and then she didn't even meet me. She was like, no, actually, you need to talk to this other guy. And that guy is now one of my co-founders. And his name is Doug Satzker. He was in the industrial design team at Apple for like 15 years. He's the guy who chose Bondi Blue and the Bondi Blue iMac, for example. Designed a lot of the original iPhone, and we just went to Blue Bottle over in FiDi, and 4.5 hours later, we were like, well, I think I'm kind of in love with you. And he's like, yeah, we should get married. And then we went and I said, hey, we need someone to represent the engineering side of things of the founding team. And he said, number one guy I know is this guy, Eric Monsef, I worked at Apple with for 15 years. He created the core hardware team at Apple, and he was just kind of tooling around because all these ex-Apple guys in their 50s are rich and going to Tahoe for a living. And so we called him, and he's like, yep, this seems way cooler than building my boat right now, so why don't we do this?
So there's a common saying that we have around here of if you want to attract the best talent, you work on the hardest problems. And that's the easiest way to find great talent. But that's seems to be a very commonality now between a lot of projects is we're all trying to work on the hardest thing. So what is is it something with how you structured your team, how you structured your day-to-day? What convinced people that this is the place that's going to solve the hardest problem?
Well, I think the core premise of that's right. I think probably everyone here is going to agree, right? Choose a really hard problem. The best people in the world are going to want to work on it because they're going to want to work on the hardest problems. There's not a lot I have to do, honestly, for recruiting. I basically just say, do you want to give people the ability to use their arms and legs again? And then in 10 years, do you want to give everyone the ability to augment any part of their body and replace their body with an artificial body? Because by the way, that's coming, for sure. And anyone who says no to that, it's I don't know, they just don't get the religion at that point, I can't share my crazy with someone that doesn't share it. That's pretty much it, honestly.
So there's a question that somebody asked for Khan a few days ago, actually. There's a project, basically, Nimi, who's here, and Valentino, two co-founders. I'm not sure if they're in the audience right now, but basically...
hustling. They're hustling right now.
Well, what they're actually doing is they're building fly factories. They're genetically modifying flies to produce certain proteins to make cheaper chemicals. And she had a really good question, which was, this is a project with a really long time horizon, something that you won't really be able to have something to show for or return to investors for a very long time. Yeah. And she was wondering, I have side quests that I can go on that can bring in revenue right now or maybe have a better call to investors. What has been your philosophy around that? Are there any side quests that Adam Limbs have gone down?
Well, so wait, is the question how do you keep people aligned over a long 10 to 20 year journey? Mm-hmm. And then the side quests people want to go on, or?
I guess both, but mostly just how do you keep everybody involved on a consistent basis, including investors? Like, what do you tell them when you know that like it's going to be a while for the project?
Yeah, I mean, there's really two things. One is like you have to build a business, right? Like there's at the end of the day, you have to make money. You can't just raise VC forever, you know, unless you're I don't know, the WeWork guy or some bullshit. So basically, we were like, look, we have a beachhead. Our beachhead is there's 100 million people in the world who have lost a limb, arms or legs, any part of it, full shoulder, just a finger, whatever. So like we have immediate market penetration we can hit. So to our investors, to my team, I just say the same thing. Like, I mean, you guys still basically do like Ship It Friday or whatever, right? It was like the same thing at Atom, because we did that at Bebo. And it was so helpful to just like constantly keep everyone aligned by just saying, look, you have to check in, you have to communicate. In my opinion, work is 50% work and 50% communication. So like, if you don't tell people what you do, they're not gonna know that you did it or give you credit. And so just like regular communication is honestly the thing there. And it's the same with our investors, weekly updates, monthly updates, going out to like way too much scotch and steak with our investors all the time. And then, you know, for the long-term vision, it's really easy too, because we just say, and I think this any company can do this, by the way. You don't have to build like mind-controlled arms for this. Just say, look, we're going to start making this much money right now if we're not making it already. And by the way, like there's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow over there, and literally just draw A, B, C, and there's Z, and you can squint and you can see it. And we're just going to keep working to hit that.
So looking forward in this timeline, what is like the next 3 biggest steps that Atom Limbs is going to take? Like, what's the most immediate, hardest problem you're working on right now? Extend that a little bit forward.
Okay. Well, the actual hardest thing we're working on right now is a secret project. Yeah. Shit.
Never mind.
Basically, I mean, it's not like that secret, but so like 2 things. One, we're making like and that's like obviously a very long-term thing, you know? And our investors are not gonna just like sit there and foot the bill for R&D for years. So I think, what was the question again?
Let's start with the hardest thing, but like, how did you determine like what's the most important thing for Atom Limbs to make an innovation on right now?
Okay, here's a better answer then. Yeah. So last summer, we basically hit a wall with our machine learning, and we said, okay, if someone loses their arm, just like a quick lesson in like prosthetics and losing limbs here for a second. So basically, like if you lose your arm above your elbow, you have 5 nerves that come out of your spine and they go out into your arm and they innervate every part of your arm. Your body is basically just a nervous system with muscles attached to it. So we use a non-invasive interface today. It's just a bunch of electrodes that someone wears around their stump. That's what you call it, the residual limb or stump. And unexpectedly, we capped out on machine learning ability restoration last summer, like 2 years ahead of when we thought we would. As in, we knew that we could restore gross motor control, so we can give you your elbow, all 3 degrees of your freedom of your wrist, and all flex extend of each of your individual fingers with this non-invasive interface. And we used classical machine learning. We weren't using transformers, no large models. And we were just like, we got to get to market as fast as possible, going back to the previous question. And also, like, we also have to go through FDA clearance and stuff, right? So we can't just be like willy-nilly updating our machine learning all the time and being like, hey, FDA, don't worry about it. Here's a fucking transformer. And they're like, what is a transformer? I thought that was a robot. And so when we capped out, I had to go to our investors and our team and be like, well, what do we do? You know, like, we knew we wanted to get into transformers and large models eventually. And we just said, well, I don't know, like, we got the team, we got the money, let's just do it now. And literally we, like, in 2 days, trained a transformer on one user's neural data from their non-invasive interface, and they got 25% more differentiation in their, like, it was insane. And we were like, oh, okay, I think this is clearly the path then. So we literally pivoted the company to just be like, we are fully admitting to the public now that we are bringing AI to the human body. We're not going to kind of be like, we're a prosthetics company that's better, and eventually we'll do cool stuff. Because we were kind of doing that from a defensive position of not wanting to signal to our competitors too much what we were doing. And honestly, I think it worked for what it's worth. We got like way more investor interest. We get like way more inbound applicants and stuff like that. But that's by far the hardest thing, is trying to keep up with this current AI wave, even in what we do. And like when we hit a choke point, like, okay, we got to turn the whole ship and, you know, keep going. And we're only 15 people right now still. So it's not even like it's that big of a team to turn, but it's still an effort.
So you said something there about not wanting to signal to your competitors what you were up to. We have a very common philosophy here that we always spill out to people of like build in public. That's like something that we're very like always telling people to do. What is your opinion around that, and how do you determine like what are things that you want to share and what you don't want to share?
No, do that. Don't do what we do. Like, we're a gigantic exception that proves the rule. And the only reason that we do that is because basically Elon Musk and everyone else is throwing billions of dollars into brain interfaces. And we didn't want them to know that we were, for example, working on a nerve interface. Because there's lead times to these things, like with working with the FDA or doing clinical trials. So like, for example, when Apple launched the iPhone in 2006, when they announced it at WWDC, they announced it 6 months ahead of when you could buy it, which they never do, right? But they had to do that because the next day they were filing with whoever was the FTC or whatever, here's the iPhone, we need you to approve this, and it was gonna leak to the press no matter what. So in hard tech, I have definitely found, this is my fourth company, I've definitely found that like there are exceptions to those rules sometimes. I don't think you should break those rules or bend them unless you have like gigantic proof that you're right in doing that. Build in public, ship in public. It's going to keep you honest. It's going to keep you moving faster. You're going to get more customers. You're going to get more hiring inbound. You're going to get more investors. And for what it's worth, I think we do that too. You know, we try to share as much as we can publicly.
How flexible are you as a team? And in like what your week to week looks like in terms of like what our current task is. Because one thing I'm curious about is like in terms of user feedback, right? Like you bring in somebody, they test out the arm, they give you feedback on it. You obviously have like a very long-term vision of like what the arm is going to look like and how it's supposed to function and like the different things that are meant to be for it. Like how quickly have you seen your team like pivot to different things?
Pretty much instant. Yeah, I mean, we hire for people who can pivot really fast. Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of like this Founders Inc. energy at Atom. We just try to get, I'm the second youngest person or third youngest person on the team, and I'm 39. And even the, gray-haired 50-year-old guys move fast too, because that's what we all value.
When you are hiring new talent, what is like the signals that you look for?
Okay, there's basically 3 layers. 1, mission alignment, for sure. Do you share our crazy? And that's the term I use. And the way I know if you share our crazy is I tell it straight to your face, and what's your reaction? 2, obviously competence, but like we don't do like coding tests and stuff like that. We're just literally like, have you worked on this stuff in the past? If not, you're probably not going to be a fit here right now because we're a very small early team. So like there's a lot of robotics background. So competence in robotics is one thing, but then competence in organization and communication. Like I was saying, like work is 50% work and 50% communication. So the last thing we hire for is someone who looks like they're just going to be really, really good at working with a team. And so what we call that internally is a dream team. Some people call it like a championship team or call it whatever else, but we call it a dream team, as in like an Olympic dream team. And I grew up in Minnesota, so I always think of like the 1980 Miracle on Ice hockey team and how they were basically like, before the 1980 hockey team in the U.S., Russia had won like 5 Olympics or something before that. And the U.S. was set on being like, we're going to get a bunch of pro NHL players, and they're going to do great. And Herb Brooks, who was the coach at the time for the Olympics team, was like, fuck that. We're getting a bunch of like 21-year-olds who've never really played before in professional leagues, but they've got more hustle, they've got more grit, they are more willing to do what's necessary and push and push and push to get it done. And like that's just what you need in the early stages of a company, right? I think you need it at all stages of a company, to be clear, but I just don't think that we've ever hired anyone who hasn't been that. I get a lot of inbound, for example, from people who are like, hey, I worked on this like a really cool robotics project in college or in my master's or whatever. And like that's probably the number one thing I look for is like, I don't give a fuck about where you've worked. Like if you have been doing this because you love it, then you're probably going to be a good fit.
So you hire a lot of people who are like go-getters, they go do it themselves, they're ready to pivot. What does your day-to-day look like as somebody who is managing the team? Like, are you super involved on everything that's happening in your company, or do you take like a step back?
I don't even know how I would take a step back. I like dream about what we do, I'm super involved. What does my day look like? My day is basically 90% product and engineering meetings. And then when I'm fundraising, it's 200% fundraising, and that's it. Yeah.
So do you want to talk about like how you're fundraising right now, or?
Well, now we are. Let's do it.
Oh, okay. Well, no, I'm saying like it doesn't have to be.
Sure. Yeah.
No, I'm just curious, like what that process has looked like for you so far, and like what challenges you're facing.
So I'm raising our Series A right now. We've raised 10 million to date so far through pre-seed and seed. We have had an interesting journey, by the way. I don't even know if you know this, but yeah, it's like 50% VC and 50% equity crowdfunding. Because we started in 2020 and COVID, and VCs were like not writing checks. And I was like, I can't self-fund $100 million. Like, I don't have that much money. So someone connected me with the wefunder.com team, and they rolled out the red carpet to us, and a month later we'd raised $2 million. It was insanely hard and difficult. I would never do it again, but I did it 2 more times after that. Raising, 2 other thoughts. Like, to your question, what has the raising process been like for us generally, and what am I seeing right now? The raising process for us generally, the theme I'm getting at here is that it's been incredibly difficult, even working on like a really cool company, because it's cool, but it's insanely risky, right? Like, this hasn't been done before. Literally no one has built this company before. There's humanoid robot companies. There's great robotics companies. There's prosthetics companies. No one has ever built a company that has neural interfaces and prosthetics and AI in the same company, and is pushing frontier like super hard forward. And it's just always been really difficult. It's been like a lot of pitching, like literal pitching. Like, hey, like this is what we do. This is who we are. Do you believe in this? 90% of them still say no. Just like any other fundraise in the world I've ever done for any company. What I see right now in the market is like almost an inversion of that, which is really cool. But like investors right now, I think, are kind of losing their minds a little bit about AI, like in a good way for all of us, as in they're like, oh shit, like all software is about to literally become a commodity completely. AI is just going to be the new software. And you can still work on software and AI, but if you're working on hardware and hard tech, that's a hell of a defensible moat for all sorts of reasons, right? And so when they look at us now, they're kind of like, okay, right? Like, this is something almost no one else could pull off. So even if Adam has a hard time doing it, they're still the only ones doing it.
Because I noticed that like basically over the last like month or so, all of Twitter is just pure hardware now. Like it's the main thing that's being pushed. So I was really curious like how that has affected your fundraising efforts, because we have a few hardware teams here, and like there's not too much experience around that. We're sort of like shifting into having a lot of hardware teams here.
Oh yeah, I mean it's interesting, right? Like I don't know if any of you guys get this kind of stuff in here who work on hardware, but like to your point, like I don't know, a year ago when it's all kind of started, like Balaji Srinivasan just like DM'd me. I don't know the guy, but he's like DM'd me. He's like, what you're doing is really cool. Would love to invest. It's like, all right, sweet, right? Like, I don't know. And like same thing with like Trevor Blackwell, who's one of the founders of YC. He just like, I shot him a note. I'd never met him. And I was like, hey, I feel like you've worked on robotics before and you'd be into what we're doing. And he was like, oh yeah, are you free in like a half hour? And I was like, yeah, I can get on a call. He's like, no, I'm gonna drive over. I was like, oh, okay. And then he showed up and he met us for like an hour. And then he's like, is it okay if I write, I won't say the size of the check, but he's like, is it okay if I write like a sizable check? And I was like, okay, cool. You know, like, now we had to work our asses off for like 3.5 years before that to get to that point. But it is happening for sure. I don't think that means anyone shouldn't work on software, like still work on all the cool shit, obviously.
Cool. All right, so before we open it up for questions, I have to ask this question every single time. What is just general advice that you would give, like the best piece of advice that you would give to yourself if you were at the stage that these guys are at right now?
Okay. I don't think I would have any other advice other than literally just keep going, honestly, because in my experience, like I said, I'm 39, so I'm like about to turn 40, and like I've been doing this for 20 years. The only thing that I have ever seen that separates winners from losers, people that succeed versus who fail, is literally just consistency and determination. It does not matter how much passion you have. It does not matter like how many blog posts you write or how many interviews you do. Like just keep going by the sheer virtue of the fact of two things. One, most people will quit. So most of your competitors will quit, and you can outlast them. And I think in every company I've started, actually, outlasted like a significant number of people who are just like, oh, I don't want to do it anymore. And the second fact is the people who don't quit probably still won't go as fast as you. And you can run way faster than you think you can, right? Like, it's not even a measure of are you staying awake at all hours of the day, but focus. Like, this is what I'm doing it now, I did it, I told my team I did it, what's next? And just keep repeating that process just over and over relentlessly.
Word. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Tyler. We're going to open it up to a few questions now. Oh, you can point.
Oh, my bad. That's not my job.
On your last point of focus, I'm curious what you do to put yourself in a state that you can work at that level, right? How do you make sure that you can recover well enough so you can work at your peak?
How do you get into this state of staying focused all the time, basically? Well, I'm a crazy person, so I'm just always in that state. Everyone has their different tricks. For me, it's sleeping really, really well, exercising every morning, telling my fiance that I love her, and taking that energy through the whole day, and then just working with like really good people, pretty much. I think other people, they got their tricks, caffeine, whatever works. Like Warren Buffett drinks like what, 20 Diet Cokes a day or some shit? Like, just do it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there is a trick, honestly, other than picking a really good thing to work on that excites you, basically.
Yeah. Like what happens to me sometimes is I'll get sidetracked a little bit, and it feels really nice, like it's exciting, but then I feel like maybe I should be working on my thing more, right? Like how do you prioritize it, or is it just that this is like really you don't care about anything else, right?
It's always more easy to open like YouTube or Twitter, right? Than just like do what you want to do, for sure. I definitely believe that like hard work is hard because it's work for most people. And so there's one muscle that I've built more than anything else, which is the work muscle, as weird as that sounds. But it's literally just like, okay, I'm coming up against a hurdle. I don't want to do this thing. Ask myself one question. Do I need to do this thing? Yes. Okay. Then I have to get it done. Set a timer for it and just get it done. And then if I really need to, give myself a little treat after,
Thanks.
Do you have any really good books that you recommend or like that have like inspired you?
Any good books? Fiction, Ender's Game. I think it's a cool book. I think it's really fun. I think it's inspiring for people who are just probably pretty gifted, which is like a lot of people in this room, and how to use that gift well. Nonfiction, there's probably too many, but I think like studying history is really great. Like American Colossus is one of my favorite books, which is about like post-World War II U.S. recovery and like how all the leaders of the world decided that the U.S. was going to be like the center of the world basically after that. And it kind of gets me into this state of like, oh yeah, think big, shoot big, and like never shoot small, basically. I don't think there's any reason to shoot small, like especially with AI now. Like everything is going to change very rapidly, very, very fast. And for what it's worth, I don't think anyone in the world, for the most part, no one in the world really knows that. Like I think everyone in here knows that, but you guys are like very rare.
Why do you want to live forever?
It's too much cool shit to do.
Yeah, that's really it. Does it come from a fear of death or like a love of life? Do you think of that ever?
Yeah, it's both for me. Everyone's different. My dad died from lung cancer when I was 24. It's like right after I graduated college, and like one of my best friends died a month after school, and then one of my other best friends died a year to the date after that, and then my dad died almost a year to the date after that. And so I was like, well, this is kind of fucked. Like I don't want to die. But no, my whole life I've wanted to live forever just because I'm like, I want to go to space, man. I want to like travel the cosmos and like see all the cool shit out there and build cool shit and build robots and travel the universe with my friends and my family and like walk on Mars, go to another galaxy. I just think there's too much cool stuff out there.
Would that be an android form, you think?
That's a good question. I feel like probably, if we're really honest, it's much more energy based, Yeah. I don't know. What do I know?
I want to know that.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah, but my question is, when a school learned this, it's all financing. So if you have a long-term project, how, and I'm connecting with the question that before I asked to you, like, how you balance long-term projects with like a side project that could bring revenues in, how you separate those financing, how you make all of this together working.
So like how to balance financing a company short-term and long-term when you have long-term vision like this, or?
And also like, if for like main projects and side projects that can bring revenue faster.
Yeah. I only know one way to do it, which is you have to say we're going to make money now. No investor is going to invest without you saying we're going to make money now, basically. Even like, you know, crazy stuff like humanoid robots. Like they're behind the scenes, all those founders are telling their investors like, we're 2 years away from revenue, we're 1 year away from revenue. And there are investors who get that, you know, like if you make a medical device, for example, or like a drug, you know, they get that you have to like work on it for a long time before you're going to make revenue. So it's just about aligning with the right investors for the most part for financing, and just using tools like Crunchbase or PitchBook or whatever to find those investors, and then telling them, hey, we're going to make money right now, but also we're going to make like way more money later. So.
When you're getting employees who ask, you share a crazy, and then you tell them straight up, you know, what is that crazy that you're looking for?
Oh, what is it that I tell them? Like, this is our crazy? Yeah. You know, that's a great question. I tell them we're going to give people the ability to live forever. We're going to unlock immortality. Do you believe in immortality? And that's basically it. Yeah. Yeah, it's a fair question. Thanks, man.
That's Nimi, by the way.
Oh, what's up?
Very good, thank you. Quick question, like when you were not sexy, for the lack of a better word, not you.
I'm gonna go. All right. Yeah.
The company, and you have to like sell this vision before the wave, right? What were you pitching then? Like right now, everybody knows robotics is cool.
Yes. Yeah, what were we pitching before, like the AI moment and all this stuff was cool? Yeah, so 4 years ago, what I was pitching was, this is a great question. It was prosthetics suck. We can make a much, much better one for 1/10 the cost. And literally what we did is we just showed up like, you know, like in like diet ads, they show like before and after photo. We literally just showed like literally a photo of a guy from 1910 wearing a prosthetic hook arm. And then we showed another guy from 2010 wearing the same prosthetic hook arm. And then we were like, and here's the true after. We can make literally a bionic arm for the same price and sell it at the same price as that hook arm. And this is getting a little bit into the weeds, but there's 2 classes of prosthetic arms today. One is like the hook arms. Those cost $25,000 to the end consumer. And then there's bionic arms that you see in like YouTube videos and stuff. Those are $200,000. And like insurance never reimburses those. And so we said, we can make an arm that's better than those bionic arms for the price of a hook. And then we just literally went to like insurers and workers' comp agencies and we're like, would you want this? And obviously they were all like, well, yeah. And so then we took that to investors and we were like, we believe in it. They'll pay for it. We have a wait list of people who want it. Prove me wrong. Yeah.
And how many general purpose, so specialized investors in your industry who know the industry really well and they will invest, but how many general investors versus very specific deep tech investors invested in you early, and how did that happen?
Like what was the balance of generalist versus deep tech versus med tech kind of investors in us?
Who believed in you the most, and how did you connect?
I mean, I gotta say, first off the bat, retail investors really believed in it, which is weird. Like they were like, oh yeah, this is amazing, right? Like, and they were like telling their friends and family about it. As for actual VCs, it was the deep tech for sure. Generalists, not really. It was a lot of like, come see us later. And I've known a lot of them for like 10 or 15 years, and they were saying that. And med tech funds, same thing. They were like, come to us when you're ready for clinical trials, basically. So generalists would be like Sequoia, A16Z, whoever. Deep tech would be like Lux, Khosla, Founders Fund, something like that. And then yeah, med tech is like, no one in this room is probably going to know them, but like Orbimed, Deerfield, places like that. Yeah. Thanks.
What's your take on iterating interfaces that in hardware, right? Like interfaces that already like exist, right? Like a prosthetic arm, and inventing new hardware interfaces for humans. This sounds like you're now thinking about augmenting human reality, right?
Yeah.
And like, how do you balance it? Like improving like humans are now, and in the future, how we might look like.
So if the question is like, how do we balance just trying to stay fast right away by not like inventing too much, for example, but keeping our eyes towards like, well, we're going to have to invent a lot and do a lot of R&D. So because prosthetics were so bad, we just said, is there off-the-shelf everything to start? Turns out the answer is basically no to pretty much everything. So we designed and developed our own actuators, our own interconnect, everything. So the arm that you see like in our videos is fully designed and developed by us. We have some contract manufacturers that will manufacture some stuff for us. We do some of it, they do some. But it actually, surprise, is mostly off the shelf because motors are motors and you can design them. And the electrodes that we use for our non-invasive interface, actually, those were already using those bionic arms today. We just made them way, way better. So really the strategy was, okay, can we basically, in 6 months max, put together a full proof of concept arm? Because if we can't, it's just going to take too long and no one's going to fund it. And we found a path to do that, which was use off-the-shelf electrodes. Literally, we like took someone else's electrode band and like ran it through like an electron microscope and reverse engineered it, and then like made our own band. And it was like 2 weeks. And then with all the actuators, we just got this like super cracked Apple engineer who like designed all their motors, and he like first shot like designed like the best actuators I've ever seen. And then we put it all together in an arm, and it was like super shitty, and it was attached with toe straps from a truck. Like that's how you wore it. Yeah, like literally we had like an amputee come in the office and we were like, do you mind if we just like tie you up basically and just hoist this arm onto you? And he's like, yeah, cool. As for developing stuff long term, that's I think mostly an investor game of like, hey, do you believe in this long term vision? Because this is, to many questions here today, like it's going to take a long time and a lot of money. Yeah. Thanks, man.
Yeah, so we're also doing a medical device, and like one of the biggest hurdles is like a lot of investors are just scared of like the FDA process. They don't really understand it, but it's a huge roadblock to like funding, at least initially. So I don't know like how you guys, your strategy to getting around that, at least getting the initial traction.
Like how to find people who invest in medical devices early?
Or we're not really to the stage, because those medtech funds, they're like clinical trials like that stage.
Yeah.
So we're pitching to VCs who are like more general, but we want to explain the FDA process in a way that they're comfortable with it.
Okay. I feel like this kind of gets back to your question a little bit, but basically like there are many VC funds out there who do pretty much everything at every stage. I do not believe in the people who say like I can't find the right investor, because they definitely exist, as in like the category of investor. They may not personally be into what you're doing, but they exist. So like there's early stage everything. There's early stage med device, there's early stage deep tech. I think to your point, there's way more early stage deep tech than med device, for example. I think I personally know like 5 funds total that do early stage med devices. And so it's going to the deep tech folks who cross over into medical and say, yeah, we don't care about FDA. Like we get that, or we trust you guys with it. And there's plenty of those. Like I think the 50 years folks, Age One, there's a bunch of funds that do that kind of stuff. There's plenty of angels too, like Ariel Polar, or I guess like Leo Polovets, who like just left Sousa that he started and started Humba VC. Like there's a lot of people out there for sure who invest in that stuff.
Like when you were initially pitching, was FDA even like something you talked about, or was it not even part of the talk?
Yeah, FDA had to be a part of what we were talking about, because like no one would be like, yeah, we'll fund you even if you don't understand what FDA is, like. So what I had to do is I went and basically stole the medical director from Neuralink, and he's our medical director now. Yeah. Which like, if you could do that, do that. But short of that, just like get someone on your team who's taken medical devices through FDA before, and I find that pretty much every company I advise who's trying to do med fundraising, like that's usually good enough for investors. Like you got someone on your team who's competent, who's taken a class 1, 2, or 3 device through FDA clearance or approval, cool.
All right, we have time for 2 more. Connor?
This might be like a little too detailed, but you said one of the key considerations for your customers was going to be cost.
right, of the arm. But will it always have to be customized because everyone's bodies are different, everyone's conditions are different? So how do you kind of square that with making it cost effective?
Yeah, how do we think of cost with customization or personalization? Because everyone's, for example, stump is different. Yeah, there's 3 parts to the arm. There's the robot arm itself. There's the neural interface, non-invasive and soon to be invasive. And then there's the attachment, which is basically a socket. And everyone's sockets until we came along were plaster cast molded. So you'd have to go, if you lost your arm, you'd have to go to a person called a prosthetist that's in like a fucking old Radio Shack location, you know, and they would literally put plaster, you know, and cast your arm. And then 3 months later, you'd get a socket. They weren't that expensive. They didn't work that well, but they were there. So we just said, this is dumb. Doug, basically our chief design officer, my co-founder, had worked on a lot of soft goods and wearables for Apple. And he was like, he literally called a meeting one day and he was just like, hey, I think we can do this like a shoe. And we were like, oh, okay. Like, what does that mean? Basically what it means is we have a one size fits most socket. And so the ordering process for our product will look like this. You go to our website, go to atom.com, you click buy. It's like ordering a Tesla. You configure it. When you buy it, download our app, scan your stump with your iPhone, and we know generally what shape and size it is without getting too into the weeds, to your point. For the most part, actually, pretty much everyone generally is like 1 or 2 different shapes and sizes for the most part. And then we know like whether to give you small, medium, large, or extra large, basically. And then there's a whole bunch of boas that can like ratchet the socket tighter or looser, which also helps, for example, with comfort. And like if you're wearing a prosthetic arm and it's 110 degrees out, you don't want to wear it, it shouldn't take more than 10 seconds to take it off. So there's a lot of trade-offs we put in the design process, yeah.
Question, what was your pitch to the crowdfunding campaigns and did it change each time?
What was our pitch to crowdfunding? You're just testing my memory at this point.
Or is it the same kind of live forever thing to VCs, or was it different?
No, we definitely did not say live forever publicly. No, it was pretty straightforward. We said we're making a prosthetic arm. It's better. It's going to cost a lot less. We've built growth engines in the past, so we know how to get like users and wait lists and stuff like that. We got the right team to do it, got the team, the talent, the culture we can push through. And it was pretty straightforward. I mean, literally our wefunder.com page looked like a pitch deck, basically. It was like 10 slides. It was like, here's our amazing team. Here's this problem. Oh no. What if there was a better solution? And that didn't change that much, honestly. I think the like tagline changed for the company a bunch of times. Like it used to be artificial limbs to end physical disability, which is a laudable goal. But we're thinking much bigger than that. So like that, for example, evolved over time to now we say we're making artificial bodies as capable as natural bodies.
Cool. And then one thing that I just want to ask real quick is what has been the impact that you've seen what you're doing on amputees? Like when you bring them in and you show them this technology, can you just touch on like the impact that you've seen and how that's personally affected your motivation?
Yeah. I mean, you ever see like those videos of like a kid getting their hearing restored? It's pretty much like that every time. The first guy, for example, we ever put an arm on, he was 80 years old and he had lost his arm 2 years earlier in a biking accident. And he hadn't used it in 2 years. And he had a pre-order for a $150,000 bionic arm. And he was like super disappointed in what it was going to be able to do. And his son was, I think, an orthopedic surgeon. I can't remember. Anyway, as soon as he put on our arm and he moved one finger, he moved his index finger, and he just like started crying. And his son had to leave the room. And I walked out and I talked to his son. I was like, hey, are you doing okay? Like, we can stop. And he's like, no, I just don't think you understand what you're giving my dad, you know? And like there was a woman who came in who was 45 and she had lost her arm at 2 years old in Venezuela in war. And she was like super made fun of her whole childhood for not having an arm. She's like a classic example of like the actual bullying we all kind of like hear about. Like most people, I don't think are bullied for the most part who lose limbs, but she definitely was. And it was like really sad. And it was like it was a slog, right? Like we were restoring her elbow and then her wrist and then her fingers. And like, I mean, it was like every 5 minutes we had to take a break, you know? And so I think for us as the team, we had to kind of steel ourselves, you know, and be like, okay, we have to test on users every single week. It's not going to be easy. A lot of these people have been through some serious shit. And so we just lead with compassion, basically. I would definitely say that I think I probably was maybe a little bit, in my early career, a little bit more like move fast, break things. And now I'm more like move fast, break things, love people, maybe? I don't know, but yeah, leading with compassion has definitely helped a lot. And that's something we've learned a lot as a team.
Thank you for your time, man.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
So Tyler's going to stick around for just a little bit. So if you guys want to